Did you know thousands of women were tortured to death for being witches? Ever wonder what really happened during those dark times when a simple accusation could end in flames? Number 8. The swimming test. Could water determine if someone was a witch? Medieval witch hunters thought so. The infamous swimming test was one of the most terrifying ordeals accused witches faced during the height of witch trial hysteria. The concept behind this test was horrifyingly simple. Witches would float, while innocent people would sink. The accused would be stripped down, bound with rope, often with their right thumb tied to their left big toe, and their left thumb to their right toe, and thrown into a body of water, usually a pond, lake, or river. Those who floated were deemed to be rejected by the purifying water, proving their guilt as witches. Those who sank were considered innocent, but many drowned before they could be pulled out. In Essex, England, swimming tests became so popular that professional witch prickers traveled from town to town conducting these deadly experiments. One notorious witch finder, Matthew Hopkins, made a considerable fortune charging villages to conduct these tests. He claimed to have found evidence against more than 300 women during his witch-hunting career in the 1640s. The swimming test placed victims in an impossible situation: float and be executed as a witch, or sink and possibly drown, proving your innocence. Some accounts tell of officials who would eventually pull sinking victims from the water, but many weren't fast enough. The water test essentially created a death sentence either way. Survive and face execution, or drown during the test itself. What makes this practice even more disturbing is how it manipulated basic physics to ensure convictions. A person bound in the traditional manner with arms and legs restrained would often trap air in their clothing, causing them to float temporarily. This perfectly natural phenomenon was interpreted as supernatural evidence against. Number 7. The witch's teat. Have a mole, birthmark, or skin tag on your body in medieval Europe that could have gotten you killed. Witch hunters obsessively searched accused women's bodies for what they called the witch's teat, or devil's mark, any unusual skin feature believed to be where a witch nursed her. Demonic familiar. During witch trials, accused women were stripped naked, and every inch of their bodies was examined by experts looking for these marks. These examinations were humiliating public spectacles where women had no privacy or dignity. Inquisitors would shave all body hair to ensure no mark was hidden, and would probe any suspicious spots with needles to test for sensitivity. They believed a witch's mark would be numb and wouldn't bleed when pricked. The search for the witch's teat reveals the deeply sexual nature of witch hunts. Female bodies were objectified, scrutinized, and violated under the guise of religious authority. Midwives and female healers who possessed knowledge of women's bodies were particularly vulnerable to these accusations. Agnes Sampson, a Scottish midwife executed in 1591, was subjected to a full-body examination where inquisitors discovered a mark on her private areas they claimed was proof of her pact with Satan. She was tortured extensively until she confessed, and was ultimately strangled and burned. Her case demonstrates how natural bodily features became evidence of supernatural evil. Even more disturbing was how common these marks actually were. Nearly everyone has some kind of skin irregularity: a mole, a scar, a birthmark. This meant virtually any woman could be found guilty if an examiner was determined enough. Some accusers would even claim temporary invisibility of these marks, suggesting the devil could hide them to protect his servants. Number 6. Impossible confessions. Did you know many witches confessed to physically impossible acts? Under extreme torture, accused witches admitted to flying through the air, transforming into animals, and causing storms with magic potions. These fantastical confessions were recorded as fact and used as evidence against other suspects. The methods used to extract these confessions were horrific. Sleep deprivation was a common starting point, keeping an accused witch awake for days until hallucinations began and reality blurred. Then came physical tortures: thumbscrews that crushed fingers, leg vices called boots that shattered shin bones, and the strappado, where victims had their arms tied behind their backs and were lifted by a rope dislocating their shoulders. In Germany, where witch trials reached their peak intensity, professional torturers developed specialized tools specifically for witch confessions. The pair of anguish was an expandable device forced into bodily orifices, then gradually opened. The breast ripper was exactly what its name suggests, a tool designed to mutilate women's bodies until they would admit to anything to stop the pain. These tortures continued until the accused confessed, often using specific script provided by their torturers. Catherine Wenham, tried in England in 1712, initially denied all charges, but after 3 days of torture confessed to flying on a broomstick, transforming into a cat, and causing crops to fail. Her confession followed almost exactly the accusations laid against her, as if reading from a prepared statement. What makes these confessions particularly disturbing is how they were used to validate the witch hunter's worldview. The more outlandish the confession, the more it proved the serious demonic threat witches posed. Some confessions included detailed accounts of Sabbath's midnight meetings with Satan, where witches allegedly engaged in orgies, cannibalism, and ritual inversions of Christian practices. These descriptions often matched popular woodcuts and pamphlets circulating at the time, suggesting tortured women simply repeated stories they had heard to stop the pain. Number 5. The economic incentives. Would you accuse someone of witchcraft if you could profit from it? Many witch hunters did exactly that. Behind the religious fervor of witch trials lurked disturbing economic motivations that turned accusation into a profitable enterprise. Professional witch finders charged substantial fees to identify witches in communities. Matthew Hopkins, England's self-proclaimed witchfinder general, demanded payment for each witch he discovered. Records show he could earn the equivalent of several years' wages for an ordinary worker in just a few months of witch hunting. Villages would pay handsomely, believing they were investing in community safety. Even more disturbing was the practice of asset forfeiture once convicted of witchcraft. A woman's property was seized. In some regions, this property was divided between the church, local government, and even the accusers themselves. This created a perverse incentive to target women with property or wealth. Widows who had inherited their husbands' estates were particularly vulnerable to accusations. In the infamous case of Julius Duncan in Scotland, her employer, David Seaton, began accusing her of witchcraft shortly after discovering she stood to inherit property. After brutal torture, including having her head wrapped in a rope that was progressively tightened, she confessed and was executed. Her property was distributed among various officials involved in her case. The witch trials in Salem, Massachusetts, reveal similar patterns. Many accusations targeted individuals whose land stood in the way of others' economic interests. The Putnam family, major accusers during the trials, had ongoing land disputes with several of the accused. After executions, this prime farmland suddenly became available for redistribution. Court officials also profited directly from trials. Judges, jailers, and executioners all collected fees for their services. Accused witches were often forced to pay for their own imprisonment, torture equipment, and even the wood for their execution pyres. Those without funds to pay these expenses faced even harsher treatment. Some records show families going into debt trying to support accused relatives during lengthy imprisonment. Number 4. The Malleus Maleficarum. Have you heard of the book that caused thousands of deaths? The Malleus Maleficarum, Hammer of Witches, became the definitive witch-hunting manual of the late medieval period, and its disturbing content reveals the deeply misogynistic foundations of witch persecution. Published in 1487 by German Dominican friars Heinrich Kramer and Jacob Sprenger. This text wasn't just any book. It was essentially an instruction manual for finding, interrogating, torturing, and executing witches. The Catholic Church initially rejected the text, but it found enormous popularity among both Catholic and later Protestant witch hunters. The Malleus explicitly linked witchcraft with women, asking, "Why is it that women are chiefly addicted to evil superstitions?" Its answer was unambiguous. Women were inherently weaker, more carnally inclined and intellectually deficient compared to men. The authors claimed women's insatiable sexual desire made them primary targets for demonic pacts. According to the text, women's minds were slippery and unable to maintain spiritual discipline. What made this text particularly devastating was its methodical approach. It outlined specific physical signs to look for, unusual marks or moles, behaviors that indicated witchcraft, knowledge of healing herbs, living alone, and detailed torture methods to extract confessions. It provided templates for questioning that led inevitably toward confession, regardless of actual guilt. The book's influence can't be overstated. It went through 29 editions between 1487 and 1669 and was second only to the Bible in popularity in parts of Europe. Judges carried copies into courtrooms, inquisitors referenced it during interrogations, and local officials used it to justify expanding witch hunts in their communities. Perhaps most disturbing was the Malleus's instruction that accused witches must be stripped naked and have all body hair shaved before torture to search for hidden charms or marks. This dehumanizing practice became standard procedure, subjecting countless women to public humiliation before their torture even began. The manual specifically recommended targeting midwives, claiming they were particularly susceptible to demonic influence due to their knowledge of reproduction and healing. Number 3. The demographic pattern. Did certain women face greater risk of being accused as witches? The disturbing truth is that witch accusations followed clear demographic patterns that reveal much about the social dynamics at play during these persecutions. The typical accused witch was not who modern popular culture might suggest. She wasn't a young, beautiful temptress or a mysterious crone living deep in the forest. Historical records reveal a much more specific profile. Women between 40 and 60 years old, widowed or never married, living alone, often working as midwives or healers, and frequently poor but occasionally possessing modest property. In the German town of Wissensteig, where 63 women were executed for witchcraft in 1562, records show 71% were widows. In North Berwick, Scotland, most accused women were elderly healers who practiced traditional medicine. This pattern repeated across Europe. Women who existed outside traditional family structures faced heightened suspicion. Economic vulnerability played a crucial role. When harvests failed or livestock died mysteriously, communities looked for scapegoats. Single women without male protectors made easy targets. Their marginal economic status meant they often begged or relied on community charity, creating resentment among neighbors who might later become accusers. The targeting of healers and midwives reveals another disturbing aspect of witch hunts. They represented an attack on women's traditional knowledge. These women possessed understanding of herbal remedies, childbirth, and natural healing methods passed down through generations. As male-dominated medical professions emerged during this period, traditional female healers became competition to be eliminated. Agnes Waterhouse, executed in England in 1566, fits this profile perfectly. a widow in her 60s who lived alone and supplemented her meager income selling herbal remedies. She was accused after a neighbor's milk curdled unexpectedly. Her knowledge of plants, independent living situation, and age all matched the witch profile that had become firmly established in the community's mind. The persecution of these specific demographic groups served important social functions. It reinforced patriarchal family structures by making independence dangerous for women. It transferred economic resources from vulnerable women to the community. And it eliminated knowledge and power held by women outside male institutional control. Number 2. The scale of the killings. How many women actually died during Europe's witch-hunting frenzy? The numbers are more shocking than most people realize. While popular culture might suggest a few isolated incidents, historical records reveal a systematic campaign of gender-based violence spanning centuries. Between 1400 and 1750, approximately 40,000 to 60,000 people were executed for witchcraft across Europe. Of these victims, between 75% and 85% were women, meaning at least 30,000 women were killed. In some regions, the gender disparity was even more extreme. In parts of Germany, over 90% of those executed were female. The concentration of killings varied dramatically by region. Some areas experienced what historians now call witch panics, sudden outbreaks of accusations and executions. In Trier, Germany, 368 people were executed between 1587 and 1593, nearly wiping out entire female populations in some villages. In Würzburg, 900 people were burned over just 5 years. The methods of execution were deliberately brutal, designed not just to kill, but to terrorize and warn others. While burning alive was most common across continental Europe, hanging was preferred in England, and crushing under heavy stones was used in some regions. These public spectacles drew large crowds and were treated as community events, sometimes with festival-like atmospheres. What's particularly disturbing about these killings is how they accelerated over time rather than diminishing with advancing knowledge. The peak of witch executions came not in the Dark Ages, but during the early modern period and Renaissance. The mass killings coincided with the printing press, scientific advancement, and expanding education, suggesting that persecution of witches served important social and political purposes independent of genuine belief in magic. The Basque witch trials of 1609 to 1611 demonstrate the potential speed and scale of these persecutions. In just 2 years, around 7,000 cases were investigated by the Spanish Inquisition. While most suspicious deaths throughout history received minimal investigation, authorities dedicated enormous resources to hunting witches, showing the priority placed on controlling women perceived as dangerous. Perhaps most chilling is how entire communities participated in these killings. Neighbors accused neighbors' children, testified against parents, and crowds gathered to watch executions. The witch hunts weren't just the work of zealous officials, but required broad social participation, revealing how effectively fear and misogyny can be weaponized within communities. Number 1. The witch trials never really ended. Are witch trials truly a relic of the past? The disturbing reality is that while the terminology has changed, many patterns established during medieval witch hunts continue into the modern era. The last official witch trial in Europe took place in 1782, when Anna Goldie was executed in Switzerland. But witch hunting simply evolved rather than disappeared. In the 19th century, women exhibiting unconventional behavior were increasingly diagnosed with hysteria rather than witchcraft. The treatment, isolation, restraint, painful water cures, and sometimes forced institutionalization paralleled earlier witch trial practices. Even more disturbing are contemporary witch hunts occurring worldwide. In Guinea, elderly women are still banished to witch camps after accusation. In Papua New Guinea, women accused of causing misfortune through sorcery face torture and execution by their communities. In Taka, thousands of elderly women have been killed in the 21st century after being labeled as witches, often to seize their property. The Salem witch trials, perhaps America's most famous case, demonstrate how witch-hunting mentality continues to influence modern thinking. While only 20 people were executed, the emotional narrative of false accusation and hysterical persecution has been referenced repeatedly throughout American history. During the McCarthy era, Arthur Miller explicitly linked the anti-communist hearings to witch trials in his play The Crucible. Similar comparisons emerged during the Satanic Panic of the 1980s and various conspiracy movements since. What connects medieval witch trials to modern persecution is the underlying pattern. Vulnerable individuals, usually women, become scapegoats during times of social stress. Economic downturns, disease outbreaks, and political instability have consistently triggered searches for human causes of seemingly inexplicable suffering. The digital age has created new forms of witch hunting. Social media allows rapid spread of accusations without evidence, public shaming without trial, and community enforcement of conformity. While not resulting in physical execution, these digital persecutions often follow remarkably similar patterns to historical witch hunts, focusing disproportionately on women who challenge social norms, using public humiliation as punishment. Medical professionals who provided reproductive health care in conservative regions describe experiences strikingly similar to accused witches, community hostility, threats of violence, and being blamed for social ills. Women in politics face accusations framed in language that echoes witch trial rhetoric, secret cabals, hidden powers, unnatural influence. What questions should we be asking about our own society? What vulnerable groups do we blame for problems we don't understand? Who faces persecution based on fear rather than evidence? The disturbing patterns of the witch trials may be closer than we think, just wearing different disguises. Are we really so different from those medieval witch hunters after all?